At a corporate party, I was approached by my unfaithful wife's boss. "From now on, she belongs to me, and you will continue to support her and your paltry existence. If you resist this, I will see to it that you are left with nothing." My response was swift and ruthless. The evening of the corporate party was to be a joyous occasion. My wife, Emily, had been looking forward to it for weeks. She spared no expense, buying a custom-made emerald dress from a professional stylist and insisting that I wear my most formal suit. She wanted us to look like the perfect couple that others would envy. However, as we crossed the threshold of the luxurious ballroom of the Grand Hotel Kensington, I felt the pretense hanging between us like a thread about to break. Over the past 6 months, Emily had become distant. She began avoiding eye contact during conversations, her laughter seemed hollow, and her late-night meetings at work became too frequent to ignore. There were even nights when she came home with the slight odor of someone else's cologne. I began to notice whispers and leering looks at events in her office. And then there he was, Richard Vaughn, her CEO. Richard acted like he owned the world, which in many ways he did. I once saw him publicly berate a waiter for bringing the wrong wine, he said with contempt in his voice, as if the mistake were a personal insult. His arrogance extended to all interactions, making it clear that he considered himself untouchable. He had the sternest suits, the most luxurious cars, and a matching ego. His presence loomed over the party, and every time he passed Emily, her gaze settled on him like a moth to a flame. It didn't take a detective to figure out what was going on, but I hadn't confronted her yet. I needed proof, and tonight I planned to get it. As the evening wore on, I sipped whiskey at the bar, and my eyes followed Emily. She fluttered between groups of coworkers, her smile bright but her movements nervous. Richard, meanwhile, seemed always nearby, his hand touching her too carelessly, his whispers eliciting smiles too easily. Then came a moment that solidified my suspicions. Emily retreated to the restroom, and Richard soon followed. My pulse quickened. Leaving my drink on the counter, I quietly followed them down the hall. They didn't go to the restroom. Instead, they slipped into the private living room. The door closed behind them with a click. I pressed my ear against the wood, and my stomach rumbled as I caught scraps of their conversation. "I'm tired of hiding," Richard said, his voice low but smug. "When are you going to tell him?" Emily hesitated. "Richard, you don't understand. Adam isn't a fool. He won't just do nothing." Richard interrupted her, contempt audible in his tone. "Men like him are spineless. Besides, when I'm done with him, he won't have a chance to fight back." My hands clenched into fists, but I forced myself to keep silent. This wasn't the moment. When they finally left the living room, Emily was blushing, her eyes darting around the room nervously. Richard, on the other hand, looked pleased, like a predator certain of defeat. I returned to the bar, pretending not to move, but my thoughts were racing. Later that night, as the party began to wind down, Richard came up to me and clapped a hand on my shoulder. His grip was firm and commanding. "Adam," he said, flashing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Emily speaks highly of you, says you've been so supportive of her career." The condescension in his tone was unmistakable. "Of course," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Her success means I'm doing well," he continued, leaning in so that only I could hear. "You have to keep that attitude because from now on she's mine and you're going to support her in your worthless life. Or I'll make sure you're left with nothing." I stared at him, stunned by his insolence. Before I could answer, he patted my shoulder again and walked away, his laughter echoing in my ears. That night, as Emily slept beside me, I stared up at the ceiling, repeating Richard's words over and over again. He thought he could take everything from me, my wife, my dignity, my livelihood. But he had underestimated me. If he wanted a fight, I would have given him one and one. The next morning, I began to gather my weapons. I contacted old friends in the world of finance, people who were indebted to me. On the surface, Richard's reputation was impeccable, but no one rises to his level without skeletons in his closet. My connections didn't disappoint. Within days, I had a dossier of his shady dealings, offshore accounts, fake financial statements, and worst of all, a veiled reward for covering up an affair with another employee. Then I turned my attention to Emily. I tracked her cell phone, installed a discreet recording device in her car, and monitored her email. It didn't take me long to find what I was looking for: candid messages between her and Richard detailing their plans to be together. Each word was like a dagger stabbing into my heart, growing deeper with each revelation. My chest tightened, my breathing became shallow, and the weight of betrayal came over me. But I didn't let the pain cloud my thoughts. I forced myself to translate the pain into determination, knowing that the time to act was approaching. This wasn't just about betrayal, it was about justice. With evidence in hand, I put my plan into action. Richard was hosting an investor gala the following weekend, an event critical to securing new funding and maintaining stakeholder confidence. It wasn't just a gala, but a carefully crafted opportunity to consolidate his influence and determine the future trajectory of the company. It was the perfect stage for his downfall. I anonymously tipped off financial reporters about Richard's offshore accounts and falsified reports, providing them with the documents they needed to uncover the story. At the same time, I sent copies of the evidence of fraud to the company's board of directors, providing a spectacular collision of his personal and professional life. On the evening of the gala, I arrived with Emily, playing the role of supportive husband. She seemed tense, her eyes darting to Richard every few minutes, but she suspected nothing. At the height of the evening, as Richard gave a speech about integrity and innovation, the energy of the room changed. Phones buzzed with the latest news, and whispers spread like wildfire. The journalist I had alerted had published an expose containing compelling evidence of financial irregularities. Richard's board members who were present immediately called an emergency meeting, leaving him floundering on the stage. But I wasn't done yet. As the hall descended into chaos, I turned to Emily. "Would you mind checking your email?" I said calmly. She frowned and pulled out. Her face went pale as she read the messages I forwarded to her, her own incriminating words. "Adam, she stuttered. "Leave it alone," I said coldly. "You've made your choice, Emily. Now you're going to have to live with the consequences." By the end of the night, Richard's career lay in ruins. The board of directors called an emergency vote and removed him as CEO on the spot. Meanwhile, police officers, armed with warrants and grim-faced, waited outside the hotel to escort him out. Guests whispered as they watched the man who once exuded untouchable arrogance being led out in handcuffs, his carefully constructed empire crumbling before their eyes. Emily, who finds herself at the epicenter of events, has been fired for her role in the scandal. Her dream life with Richard evaporated before her eyes. The next day I filed for divorce, taking care to preserve most of our assets. Emily begged me to forgive her, but I'd had enough. She and Richard tried to destroy me, but ended up with nothing. As I walked out of the courthouse, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in months. Justice had been served, and I had my life back. Looking back, I realized that Richard's arrogance was his greatest weakness. He thought he could control me, but he forgot one simple truth: a man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous of all. Thank you for participating in this story with me. If it touched you, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. I've noticed that many of you who enjoy these stories haven't subscribed yet. By subscribing, you're not just following the channel, you're becoming part of a community that appreciates deep, meaningful stories. Let's continue to explore these heartfelt journeys together. Don't forget to hit the call notification button so you don't miss our next story. Until we meet again, and don't forget life is short for missing out on happy moments.